Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the First World War. I'm Mike B, back after a while of not making these videos, and this is one that I've been wanting to make for a while. I had to do a little bit of brushing up. This is going to be talking specifically about the World War I American Expeditionary Forces food service, but a lot of these same concepts and same things will apply to other nations' militaries during this time. So when the United States entered the First World War, obviously, like I say in every video, they were very unprepared. One thing they did have was a know-how of how to get food to their troops. And at this point, they actually didn't have any rations. They had this thing called an emergency ration that I'm pretty sure Steve, 1989, actually opened up. It's a little tin that's about this big that contains some hardtack, some coffee, sugar, and I think that's about, it's just some big, I mean, it's literally a survival and emergency ration for if you're starving to death, if you get cut off or you get captured or something. They didn't actually have any rations. So what the whole concept was, and this is kind of true, through until today, is let's get the guys hot chow. So we're going to have these things called field kitchens. Here's a picture of one. I don't know what nationality this is, but it's very similar to, these field kitchens were very similar in all nations. Some of them call them goulash cannons and stuff like that. A couple nicknames for them. And so this is what they would roll around with. They were horse-drawn usually, and they would set up in an area. Here's a picture that I found of somebody who does reenactments. That's a really cool representation of what a field kitchen, an American field kitchen, would have looked like in the First World War. So you see you've got the little tent, the little awning right there to kind of get somebody in some shade. And you've got the tables sitting there with a bunch of condiments and other stuff on it. Usually they would have that. The field kitchen is over there where they have stews or soup, something to feed a lot of guys, the most efficiently and the most effectively and the most quickly. Because what would happen was with the Americans, and I get this information. I want to preface all this stuff, but this is going to be an extremely macro level video on the kind of food service that the Americans had. I'm going to be doing one in the future, back when things start opening up and we can do events again. And I'm going to be talking to my friend and basically my reenacting mentor. He got me into the hobby, or not got me into the hobby, but really taught me all the intricacies that he possibly could, and he still does, about World War I U.S. troops. He's also from Wisconsin, and we do the same. When I do World War I reenacting, he's our mess sergeant, which is pretty cool. So we'll get into that. But his name is Ray Piros. He's got an actual shop. I don't know if he's got a website yet, but I'm going to throw his eBay store in the description. He sells all the collar discs. He's got German stuff. He's got all this World War I insignia that he's copied off of original examples. That it's something very niche, but if you want collar discs that are like spot on to the originals and other insignia like that, officer insignia, that's the place to go. Ray is also a super nice guy, very, very knowledgeable. He's been studying this stuff since he was a kid, but he's been specifically interested in World War I and specifically interested in the 32nd Division because he was part of the 32nd for a while, and again, home state of Wisconsin. So that's what we have in common, and I wanted to portray that unit, and so that's what we do. Now, Ray has been doing, I believe he's a chef in his day job by trade, so he carried that over into the reenacting sphere. He used to do infantry, but you get older and, you don't really want to be running around sleeping in holes, so you decide to make a really cool, unique impression that's actually functional at events. So what Ray does is another variant that they would have is they would just have like a cast iron stove that they would load onto a cart if they didn't have a field kitchen because supplies were, keeping up as much as we wanted them to in the First World War. So you could just have somebody with a stove and some cookware, but they'd still have the tables and all that stuff. You'd have a mess sergeant with, I believe, Ray, if you're watching this, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you'd have the mess sergeant, and then you'd have 1 to 2 assistant assistant cooks, I guess you would call that, and then you'd have soldiers rotating through doing KP, which hasn't changed, kitchen patrol, helping out with some basic tasks, clean up, packing up stuff to move. But the thing with American chow in the First World War and a lot of the other countries is hot chow was always a priority. You always wanted to get hot chow because A, it's a morale booster, B, you get a lot more nutrients out of freshly prepared food and freshly sourced food than you do out of rations. That was known then. It's still known today. MREs are You don't want to be living on those for extended periods of time. Whenever the Army could give us hot chow, they did. And it's always better than an MRE. It's always better, trust me. And that's saying something. So anyway, yeah, so they would have these field kitchens, and they were, honest to God, not that far behind the actual front lines. Like if they were up doing their time, their few days or week or so on the front trench, on the front line trench or in the reserve trench, you're going to have for your company, you're going to have a field kitchen set up within 100 yards or so. It always varied based on the terrain. You know, Met TC, check that out. Or I'm sorry, what the hell's the terrain thing? Anyway, I screwed that up. I screwed up the acronyms. It's been so long. Anyway, but they were going to be relatively around that distance, 50 to 150 yards, we'll say, away from the front line. So what would happen is they would prepare the food. And again, Ray, if you're watching this, correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I remember you told me, and the research that I've done indicates that as well. They'd prepare the food, and then it would be at a certain time or whatever. Troops would rotate off of the line, you know, like if you've got a team of two, one guy would go get chow, and then, you know, go there, wolf it down probably on the way back or something, and then the other people would go and get chow. You'd always rotate, so not everybody would be getting chow at the same time. And then you'd have this little ticket thing that would get punched, so nobody would go through twice, you know, so it was fair. And yeah, it was really cool the way they did that. So most of the time when the guys were up on the line, Americans would be getting a hot chow. Now, you can run into a problem with this because there weren't any rations. If you actually advance too far and your supply can't catch up with you and you're stuck there for a while, hot chow, if you rely on that, you're not going to get it and you don't have rations. So the Americans decided that at a certain point they needed to have rations, but there wasn't enough time to actually set up new factories and whatever, and new packaging and hire new people. So what they ended up doing was they contracted with civilian manufacturers who were already manufacturing stuff, and they simply said, we need food, we'll do a contract, you just need to send us as much as you can, as fast as you can. And at that time, Alaska was a territory at that point, it wasn't a state yet, but there were still Americans up there fishing, specifically for salmon, which is still true today. Alaska is very known for its salmon. And they wanted to help out with the war effort, so they also contracted and sent a metric shitload of salmon, canned salmon, right? So you've got that, you've got stuff like, or I'll show you, Ray actually has these labels. He sent them to me and I printed them out and clear coated them onto these cans for displays at events. I don't use these, obviously, because these labels are very, very hard to print. They use a lot of ink and whatever. But so this is a brand that, you know, you can see this label, this original label. I know it wouldn't fly today, but it's a piece of history. Ray took the original labels off of some original cans, very carefully in high-res scanned them so we can use them and have them on file. So these are going to be canned peas from Centerville, Maryland. And then, oh, I don't have that other can. That sucks. I can't find some of the stuff that I had. I'll have to redo this. And I know the ribbed cans aren't accurate. It's really hard to find straight cans, but it's the closest I could get. You got this from Dubuque, Iowa. It's succotash, so it's just basically mixed vegetables. You got stuff like that, and then you've got obviously corned beef. You've got Libby's, you've got Armour, you name it. All this stuff. I don't have actually a can of that here either. But so that was actually the rations in World War I were just civilian foods. Now, a lot of times they'd be getting brands that they use back home. There was another can that I had of some vegetables that was from Green Bay, Wisconsin, right? There's a manufacturing facility there that would can these vegetables and then sell them in the civilian market that now sold them to the military to use as rations, which is very interesting because we didn't actually have, you know, K rations or anything like that. So you might not have known that, but I didn't know that either when I got into the actual time period, but that's the way it was. So between the rations and hot chow, the food was actually, from what Ray has said, he's read, and what I've read, the food was generally okay because they would locally source for hot chow. They would locally source food. They'd go to a local farm and, you know, give somebody some francs for, hey, I need some, what do you have? Oh, I have turnips, I have cabbage, I have carrots, and I have beets, okay? Okay, well, I need a lot of this. Do you have any meat? Yeah, I can give you some meat. Cool. They'd barter, or, you know, sometimes they'd just be like, we need this, we're taking it. You know, we'll leave enough for you, but we have to have this. That happened a lot. It's a war, and it's not good. But a lot of the times, from what I've read, the Americans tried to pay or compensate somehow the locals for their goods. and sourcing locally. And then, so there was these manuals that you can see right here. Here's a couple, I'll just go through them, that Ray has that he actually uses to cook period correct meals when we're at a living history or reenacting event. We pay him up front so he can get all the supplies and stuff. And then when we go to the event, he actually cooks in his field kitchen, and we go through the line so people can see what it would have looked like for the guys to go through the line, rotate, and then go back and do their thing up in the trenches or wherever they were at, up in the woods, in Alsace-Lorraine. But so that's very interesting. And so what's cool about that is he's got all these original books, and there's one that is basically the manual. I forget which one it was. I'll have to ask him, but it's a manual for improvising with what you have. Like it's basically if you have this, here are the options of meals you can make to do this stuff. So it's basically like if you have turnips, if you have potatoes, if you have this cabbage, take this seasoning that you should have or whatever, and then put it in here and mix it. And just basically a cookbook for the field, improvising with what you have, which is really interesting. Meat is always a commodity. Protein is always a commodity, but there are a lot of vegetables, a lot of goulash, noodles and tomato sauce, basically, with some spices. And there was one cool instance that I'm going to give an example of locally sourced food. There was the 32nd Division, I forgot which regiment and such and company. They captured a German officer's wagon train, I guess, and they captured it, and they found what had been sent from his home were a ton of bratwurst and German sausages and sauerkraut, like fresh, in a crock, a huge crock of sauerkraut. So the Americans liberated this food and gave it to the mess staff, basically, and they cooked up a huge meal. They decided to be more efficient and fair, so they chopped up the brats and the sausages, and they put it in this giant pot, and they made chopped up brats and sauerkraut and fed that to the troops. So it was not only a morale booster because it was good food, it was a morale booster because, hey, we just got this from a German officer's wagon train that we just captured, so we're making progress. So that's the kind of stuff that would happen. That was a really cool story. Ray actually replicated that meal at an event, and my God, was that good. It's so good when you're actually hungry and you get some good food. I love brats and sauerkraut. Sausages in general are delicious. But it's really cool to have period correct cooking going on at reenactments. Because we can just eat stuff out of a can, but that's really boring, like the infantry guys eating stuff out of a can. When realistically, most of the time, by the time the Americans got there, we're going to be going back for hot chow because it's not that far. You just walk back with a couple other guys, get your food, wolf it down so you don't screw your other buddy over. He can go eat, and then the cooks start preparing for the next meal. So it was this big process. And cooks were often exposed to the same kind of dangers as the infantrymen. I specifically have a World War I U.S. service coat from the unit that I was in and I portray, that's Company B of the 128th Infantry Regiment, 32nd Division. The mess sergeant's tunic, or not tunic, they're called service coats, I always make that mistake. The mess sergeant's service coat that I have, he has one overseas service chevron, so he got there mid-deployment, so I don't know if a mess sergeant got promoted or moved around, but this guy wasn't there for the entire time, but he got there for at least 6 months. But he has 2 wound chevrons, which is the equivalent of a Purple Heart. You either get wounded or you're exposed to gas, and you would earn a wound chevron. So he was there for less than a year, but about over 6 months, and he got wounded twice in that time as a mess sergeant. So just kind of think about that. That puts that into perspective, that these guys weren't just, they're just cooks or whatever. No, these guys were up there making damn sure that whenever they could get hot chow, quality hot chow, to the guys so they could keep, strong and keep fighting. So that's that's the macro overview of the U.S. food service during World War I. I've actually had this question asked, and it's a damn good question. I love intricate questions like these, or kind of off the topic of like the infantrymen, all that stuff, the trenches. Well, how do they eat? Great question. So keep those questions coming. I love this stuff. I love doing research myself and brushing up and kind of being able to share this knowledge. Food service, people need to eat. That's one thing. You need to eat, you need water, and you need to sleep. And you need clothing, and you need shelter as best as you can, but that's it. It's like one of those, you have to eat, especially during a war. So how do you get nutritious food to soldiers? Well, you get it as fresh as possible in that time. Today, it kind of boils over in whenever you can get hot chow, the Army prefers to give you that. But a lot of times if you're out in the field and stuff, you get a ration, which sucks. But I wish it was a little bit different today, and it was also not packaged stuff, not prepackaged stuff most of the time, locally sourced. So, all right, I think I've about covered everything I want to cover. If you got any questions, I'll try to answer them. Throw them down in the comments. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy that loves doing historical research. I will be doing a follow-up video in this series. I don't know if it's going to be this year or maybe next year, with Ray and his entire field kitchen, and we're going to go through, it's going to be a long video, longer than this one. We're going to go through everything that would be part of a field kitchen, all the little details, and then he's going to probably talk about more in-depth experiences and things that he's read, firsthand accounts, and just the more intricacies of being a mess sergeant or a cook, sergeant's assistant. So we'll do that in the future. All right, so we made it to the end. Now, what makes videos like this possible, and like the one I'm going to be doing with Ray possible, is help from my sponsors, which are Patreon supporters and channel members. I know you thought it was going to be some, product that I was going to try to push on you. No, Patreon support and channel member support has been so helpful this past year, and it's been helpful right now. This is going to be an awesome year for videos. So if you want to see more cool content that I'm planning on, trying to do between self-funding and crowdfunding, guys, we're on a really cool path here. So I'm planning on making a lot of content as much as I can with the funding I'm getting from you and that I can put in from my own pocket, but the more the merrier, obviously. $5 a month or more on either method of support gets you into my Discord server, which is a really fun time. A lot of cool info there. I'm learning stuff. Learning a lot of stuff lately. It's really interesting. But yeah, so that financial support really does help, and I want to keep it that way, just crowd and self-funded, so I don't have to become a corporate shill that's selling you stuff that I really don't 100% believe in. If companies want to send me products to review, I'll do that. That's one thing, but I don't want to do the constant sponsorship thing, so that's why I like Patreon and channel membership better. All right, now we kind of got that out of the way. If you can't support the channel financially, I totally get that. You can just share this video, like it, subscribe, do all the stuff that helps the algorithm if you really want to help out, and share the video, obviously. If you found this interesting and think it's worthy of being shared, please do that. All right, that's all I've got. Again, if you got any questions, let me know in the comments section. I'll try to get them answered. I'll try to get Ray to answer them if I can't answer them. And I appreciate you watching, guys. I really do. And we'll see you on the next episode of the First World War.